Mrs. Dwyer held up Nora Mercer's essay in front of the entire third-grade class and said the word liar before Ryan Mercer had even cleared base security. He was 2 blocks away when it happened. He did not know it was happening. He did not know his daughter had been called a liar for writing about his job, or that it had been happening in smaller ways for 6 months, or that the woman he had trusted with his child had been constructing a version of his daughter that the school had accepted completely. He knew one thing. Ghost had stopped walking and turned his head toward that school building. And Ghost was never wrong. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. Subscribe, hit the bell, stay all the way to the end, because what Ghost finds when he walks through that classroom door is not just one afternoon's damage. It is 6 months of it, and every single day of it is about to come into the light. Ryan Mercer had been gone for 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. He knew the exact count because he had been marking it on the inside cover of the ops notebook he carried. 1 line per day, the way his father had marked his own deployments and his grandfather before that. The Mercer men had always counted days. It was the only way to make a long absence feel like something with an end, rather than something that just kept going. He had landed 6 hours ahead of the rotation schedule on an emergency early release tied to a personnel review that had concluded faster than command anticipated. He cleared base processing in under 2 hours, which was fast even for him. He declined transport. He signed out Ghost from the canine facility, loaded him into the back of the base pool vehicle, and drove toward the family housing unit, where Karen Voss had been living with Nora since October. He had been planning to surprise Nora. He had been thinking about it for 3 weeks, the specific image of his daughter's face when she turned around and saw him standing in the doorway. He had built that image carefully during the months when the work was difficult, and the distance was long, and the weekly calls felt shorter than they should have. Ghost changed the plan. They were walking from the parking area toward the main road when Ghost stopped. Not a gradual slow, a full, planted stop. 4 paws locked, body turned left, nose working the air in the rapid, tight cycle that Ryan had learned to read as precisely as any instrument he had ever been issued. Not environmental interest, not a passing stimulus. Acquisition. Ghost had found something in the direction his nose was pointed and was communicating it with his entire body. Ryan looked left. 2 blocks down, a school. Jefferson Elementary. The sign was visible from the corner. Nora's school. Ryan stood still for a moment. He ran the brief, automatic calculation of someone who had spent years training his instincts to trust the dog before he trusted his own assessment. He looked at Ghost. Ghost looked at the school. "Okay," Ryan said. They walked the 2 blocks. The front office receptionist saw the NWU Type 3 digital camouflage and the working canine vest and the expression on the face of the man wearing both, and made the specific, rapid decision that people make when they encounter someone operating at a frequency they do not want to obstruct. She said good morning. She started to reach for the visitor log. Ryan said his daughter's name. The receptionist's hand stopped moving. "Nora Mercer," he said. "3rd grade. Which classroom?" "Room 14, she said. "Down the hall, 2nd left." He heard his daughter's name before he reached the 2nd left turn. Not spoken warmly, projected. The flat, carrying tone of a teacher addressing a classroom with the intention of being heard by every person in it. "Nora Mercer, I want you to explain to the class why you continue to write things that are not verifiable as true." Ryan stopped walking. Ghost stopped beside him. Through the rectangular window in the door of room 14, he could see his daughter standing at the front of the classroom. 7 years old. Clean uniform, dark braids, hands at her sides with the specific, locked stillness of a child who had decided that stillness was the safest available posture. The class was watching her. Some of them were not being kind about it. Mrs. Dwyer was holding up an essay. Ryan could not read the title from the window. He did not need to. He could read his daughter's face. He had been reading it since she was born, and he knew every version of it. The happy version, the tired version, the version she wore when she was trying not to cry in front of people who had not earned her tears. She was wearing that last version right now. "My father is a Navy SEAL," Nora said. Her voice was steady. That was the thing that hit Ryan hardest. Not the situation, the steadiness. The specific, learned steadiness of a child who had been saying the same thing for a while and had been receiving the same response and had decided she was going to keep saying it regardless. "He works on classified missions. That's why I can't describe everything." Dwyer's voice dropped into the specific register of a teacher correcting a persistent behavior pattern. "Nora, this is the 4th time this semester you've written about your father, as though he works in some kind of secret government program. Your guardian, Miss Karen, has been very clear with this school that your father is not a military operative. She's told us that you have a tendency to—" "She's lying," Nora said. The class reacted. Not loudly. The specific, compound reaction of children who have been watching a situation and have just seen it escalate past the point where they expected it to stop. Dwyer set the essay on her desk. "That kind of accusation," she said, "is exactly the behavior I'm talking about. When you can't be believed about one thing, you accuse others of dishonesty to deflect. We've discussed this." Nora looked down. Ryan had his hand on the door handle. He opened it. Ghost walked in beside him. The classroom went silent, with the specific, total silence of a room that has just encountered something that reorganizes every prior calculation. 23 third graders looked at the uniform, looked at the dog, looked at the man wearing both, looked at Nora. Nora turned around. She looked at her father for one full second without moving. The expression on her face in that second was not relief, and was not joy, and was not surprise. It was the expression of a child who has been holding an enormous weight alone for a very long time, and has just seen the person she was holding it for walk through the door. Then she crossed the room. She hit him at full speed with both arms, and she did not make a sound, and she did not let go. Ryan held her. He felt the weight of her, which was less than it should have been, and the specific, too prominent feel of her shoulder blades under his hands. And he did not say anything, because there was nothing to say in the first 3 seconds that would not be inadequate. Ghost pressed against Nora's left side without being directed. He leaned his shoulder against her leg, with the deliberate, grounding pressure of an animal that had assessed the situation and assigned himself a function. Mrs. Dwyer had not moved. Ryan looked at her over Nora's head. He did not speak. He looked at her with the level, comprehensive attention of a man reading a situation he has not been fully briefed on, and filing every detail against what he already knows. He looked at the essay on the desk. He looked at the classroom. He looked at the faces of 23 children who were watching this moment with the unguarded, honest attention that children give to things that are real. He looked at Ghost. Ghost was looking at Dwyer with the amber, patient, entirely unimpressed attention he gave to situations he had already assessed. Nora pulled back just far enough to look at her father's face. She did not smile yet. She was checking, making sure he was real, making sure he was actually there, and not the version of him she had been reconstructing from memory for 6 months. She reached up and touched the collar of his NWU blouse. The digital pattern of it, green and brown, familiar from every photograph she had been carrying. "You came back," she said. "I said I would," he said. She nodded. She had known. She had always known. That was the thing she had been defending all semester. Not just the fact of his job, but the fact of him. The specific, irreducible reality of her father. And she had been defending it in a room full of people who had been telling her she was wrong. She looked at Mrs. Dwyer. Then she looked back at her father. "Karen took my lunch money," she said, "and she said you were too busy to talk. But I don't think you were busy. I think she didn't let me call." Ryan heard every word. He heard them the way you hear the things you should have known sooner, with the specific internal impact of information that explains 6 months of something you could not account for. The calls that ran short, the weeks when Nora seemed pulled back, contained, managing a distance that felt larger than geography. The times Karen answered before the relay connected and said Nora was resting, or studying, or already asleep. He had attributed it to the hard mathematics of a child managing a parent's absence. He had been wrong. He looked at Nora. He held his voice steady, the way she had been holding hers. "How long?" he asked. She thought about it with the careful precision she brought to everything that mattered. "Since November," she said. "The lunch money since 3 weeks ago. The phone calls, longer." Ryan stood up slowly. He kept one hand on Nora's shoulder. He looked at Mrs. Dwyer. "Where is the vice principal's office?" he said. Dwyer blinked. "Sir, I understand this is a lot to process, but perhaps we should—" "Where is the vice principal's office?" The question was not loud. It did not need to be loud. It had the quality of a question that is going to be answered, because the alternative to answering it has not been made available. Dwyer pointed down the hall. Ryan looked at the class. 23 children were watching him with the wide, honest eyes of people who understood they were seeing something important and were not sure yet what it meant. He looked at Nora. "Get your pencil case," he said quietly. She went to her desk and picked it up. She held it against her chest for a moment, the way she had been holding it all semester, and Ryan understood without being told what was inside it. He had sent her a photograph before he deployed, his official NWU portrait, the one with his name and rank in the caption. She had asked for a copy specifically, and he had printed one for her, and she had put it in her pencil case, and she had been carrying it every day since. He looked at Dwyer one more time. "We're going to the office," he said, "and then we're going to talk about what's in my daughter's file. All of it." Dwyer looked at the essay on her desk. She looked at the uniform. She looked at Ghost, who had not moved from beside Nora, and who was looking at her with the patient, measuring attention of an animal that had already completed its assessment and filed its conclusion. She did not argue. Ryan walked with Nora toward the door. Ghost fell in on Nora's left side, matching her pace, his shoulder still near her leg. At the door, Nora looked up at her father. "I kept telling them," she said. "Every time they said I was making it up. I kept telling them you were real." Ryan looked at his daughter, at the steadiness she had been maintaining for 6 months in a room full of people who told her she was wrong, at the photograph in her pencil case, and the clean uniform, and the chin that had been up when he walked through that door, even though every pressure in the room had been pushing it down. "I know," he said. "I heard you." They walked out together. Behind them, in room 14, Mrs. Patricia Dwyer stood at the front of a very quiet classroom and looked at the essay on her desk and at the 23 faces looking back at her, and at the door that had just closed. And she began, slowly and without ceremony, to understand the distance between the story she had been told and the story that had just walked out of her classroom. Ghost did not look back. He had already seen everything he needed to see. The hallway outside the vice principal's office was the kind of quiet that schools produce in the middle of a class period, the specific, institutional quiet of a building running on schedule, while something off schedule moves through it. Ryan walked it with Nora's hand in his, and Ghost at their left side, and the weight of what Nora had said in the classroom sitting in his chest like a stone he had not yet decided what to do with. Karen took my lunch money. The phone calls since November. He was running the arithmetic of it in the part of his mind that ran arithmetic automatically, the part that had been calibrated over 10 years of operational work to calculate implications faster than he could consciously direct it. 6 months of allotment payments, all of them transferred on schedule from his account, because he had checked, because he was thorough, because he had set up the automatic transfers before he deployed and verified them twice. The money had left his account. The question now was where it had gone after that. He already knew the answer. He just needed the paper to confirm it. Hartwick's office door was open. Vice Principal Leonard Hartwick was 52 years old and had the specific, composed energy of a man who managed difficult conversations for a living and believed he was good at it. He looked up when Ryan stopped in the doorway, and he did the rapid institutional assessment that administrators do when they encounter an unscheduled visitor. Reading the uniform, reading the dog, reading the expression, arriving at the category of situation this was going to be. He stood up. "Chief Petty Officer," he said. He had read the rank off the NWU insignia in approximately 2 seconds, which told Ryan he had dealt with military parents before. "I'm Vice Principal Hartwick. Can I help you?" "I'm Ryan Mercer, Nora's father." Ryan did not extend his hand. "I'd like to see my daughter's academic file. Right now." Hartwick's expression shifted precisely enough to be visible and not enough to be an admission. He gestured toward the chairs in front of his desk. "Please, sit down. I think there may be some context worth discussing before—" "The file first," Ryan said. "Context after." Hartwick looked at Nora, who had settled into the chair beside Ghost, with her pencil case in her lap, and her eyes tracking the conversation with the careful, absorptive attention of a child who had learned that the conversations adults had about her in rooms like this mattered, and that paying attention to them was the only leverage she had. Hartwick looked at Ryan. He pulled the file. Ryan read it standing. He read with the focused, sequenced attention he brought to any operational document, moving through each page chronologically, noting dates, noting the language used in each entry, noting what was present and what was conspicuously absent. He turned pages without commenting. Nora watched him read. Ghost watched Hartwick. The file was 16 pages. Ryan read all of them. When he finished, he set it on the desk. 4 entries citing fabrication, he said. 2 citing attention-seeking behavior. 1 recommending a psychological support assessment. He paused. All of them entered between October and now, all of them referencing information provided by the authorized guardian. The school has a responsibility to document who authorized Karen Voss as Nora's guardian, Ryan asked. Hartwick opened his mouth, closed it. Open the administrative section of the file. There is a letter of authorization on file dated September 28th, he said. He held it up. Ryan looked at the letter. It was on plain paper, not on any official form. His name was at the top. His signature was at the bottom. It was not his signature. He looked at it for a long time. He looked at the specific formation of the letters, the angle of the R in Ryan, the way the M in Mercer sat on the baseline. He had been signing his name for 30 years, and he knew every variation of his own signature under every condition. Tired, rushed, formal, informal. He had not written that signature. He set the letter down on the desk. "That's not my signature," he said. Hartwick went very still. "I understand this may be difficult." "That is not my signature," Ryan said again. Not louder, more precise. The specific repetition of a man making sure a statement is received as the factual claim it is, and not the emotional reaction it might be mistaken for. I want you to look at that letter and the date on it. September 28th. I deployed October 3rd. I was on base during the entire final processing period. I did not meet with Karen Voss to sign any authorization letter in that window. I was not in a position to do that. Hartwick looked at the letter. He looked at Ryan. He looked at Nora. Nora was looking at the letter with an expression that Ryan recognized. It was the expression she wore when she was putting two things together that she had known separately and was now seeing them connect. "She made you sign it before you left," Nora said. She said it quietly, not to Hartwick, to her father. "She put papers in front of you the night before you deployed. She said they were insurance forms. You signed them really fast because you were packing." The room was very quiet. Ryan looked at his daughter. "You saw that?" "I was watching from the stairs," Nora said. "I didn't know what the papers were. I just remembered because she seemed happy after you signed them, and she wasn't usually happy about anything." Ryan picked up the letter again. He looked at it once more. He set it face down on the desk. He turned to Hartwick. "I want the complete financial record," he said. "Every payment this school has received in my daughter's name for the last 6 months. Every transaction logged against her student account. Right now." Hartwick was already reaching for his phone. While they waited for the finance office to pull the records, Ryan sat beside Nora for the first time since he walked into the classroom. He sat in the chair next to hers, and Ghost put his chin on Nora's knee. And Ryan looked at his daughter and asked her the questions he should have been able to ask over the phone for the last 4 months, and had not been able to reach. He asked them quietly. She answered them the same way. The lunch money had stopped 3 weeks ago. Before that, for the first 2 months, it had been fine. Then Karen started giving her less. Then she said the account was short. Then she said Ryan was sending less because the mission had budget issues. Then 3 weeks ago, she stopped giving Nora anything for the cafeteria and told her to tell the school the payment was delayed. Nora had told the school the payment was delayed. The school had marked her unpaid and removed her from the cafeteria roster. She had been eating crackers. Ryan sat with that. "Who gave you the crackers?" he asked. "Miss Diana," Nora said, "the librarian. She keeps them in her desk drawer. She doesn't make me ask. She just leaves them where I can see them." Ryan made a note of the name. "Anyone else know?" he asked. Nora thought about it. "Mr. Owen," she said. "He mops the floors. He's old and he walks slow because his knee hurts. He saw me eating crackers in the hallway one time, and he didn't say anything to me. He just looked at me for a long time, and then he went back to mopping. But I could tell he was still thinking about it." "Did he ever say anything to you?" "He said, 'Are you doing all right, kid?' one time. That's all." She paused. I said yes. I don't think he believed me." Ryan nodded. The finance secretary knocked on Hartwick's open door at that point and came in with a printout that she set on the desk with a particular, careful placement of someone who had looked at what was on the paper and understood it was significant. She did not look at Ryan when she left. Ryan picked up the printout. 6 months of allotment transfers. Regular, scheduled, exact. His account to the receiving transfer relay. The relay to Karen Voss's personal account. Karen's account to the school, except the last step had not happened. The school had received 0, not reduced payments, not partial payments. 0. Ryan set the printout down on Hartwick's desk without comment. Hartwick looked at it. He looked at the 0 in the received column, repeated across 6 rows. And his face did the thing that faces do when they have been operating on a set of assumptions and the document in front of them has just removed the foundation from every one of them. The authorized guardian confirmed to us on multiple occasions that tuition was pending, Hartwick said. His voice had lost the managed quality it started with. She said the transfers were delayed due to deployment banking issues. There are no deployment banking issues, Ryan said. The money left my account on time every month. She received it on time every month. The school received nothing. Hartwick looked at the printout. He looked at Nora's file. He looked at Ryan with the expression of a man beginning to understand, fully and without the protection of plausible deniability, that the institution he had been running had been operating on fraudulent information for 6 months and had used that information to systematically document a 7-year-old child as a behavioral problem. I want to speak with my building principal, he said. After me, Ryan said. A knock at the office door. Both men turned. Diana Yuen stood in the doorway. She was in her early 30s, slight, with a composed, observant expression of someone who had made a decision before she knocked and was not going to be redirected from it. She was holding a folder. She looked at Ryan. She looked at Nora. She looked at Ghost, who raised his head from Nora's knee and regarded her with the calm, measuring attention he offered to people who arrived with something real. I'm Diana Yuen, she said. I'm the school librarian. I heard Chief Petty Officer Mercer was here. She looked at Hartwick. I have some things you need to see. Hartwick began to say that this was not a good time. It's the right time, Diana said. She walked in and set the folder on the desk beside the financial printout. I've been building this for 2 weeks because I didn't know what to do with it, and I was afraid of what would happen if I brought it to the office. I'm not afraid of that anymore. She opened the folder. Inside was a printed photograph, taken on her phone, of Nora sitting against the library wall on a Wednesday afternoon eating crackers. Date stamped in the corner. Another photo of Nora at the cafeteria counter, being told she was not on the roster. Another printed screenshot of an entry in Nora's file that read, Student exhibits persistent delusional claims regarding parents' occupation. Suggest psychological evaluation. And at the bottom of the folder, a printout of a text message. The sending number was Karen Voss's. The receiving number was the school's main office line. The date was 8 days ago. It read, Whatever she says about her father, please disregard. She has difficulty distinguishing reality from the stories she tells herself. We are working with a counselor. Nora was 7 years old. Ryan read the text message. He read it twice. He set it down. He looked at Hartwick. Hartwick was looking at the folder with the expression of a man who had just watched the floor of his professional judgment open beneath him. I want the school principal here, Ryan said. I want the full financial file and the full academic file on my daughter. And I want someone to tell me what the process is for removing every entry in this file that references fabrication, delusion, or behavioral issues. Because every single one of those entries is based on information provided by someone who is committing financial fraud against my daughter while telling this school she was a liar. The room was quiet. Ghost stood up, not threatening, not posturing. He simply stood, because standing was the posture of an animal that had finished being patient with the pace of a situation and was ready for it to move. Nora looked at Ghost, then at her father. Mr. Owen has a notebook, she said quietly. Ryan looked at her. He told me once he writes things down, she said. Old habit, he said, from the army. She looked at her pencil case. I think he wrote things down about me. The lunches and stuff. I saw him writing when he thought I wasn't looking. Ryan looked at Hartwick. Where does the custodian work? He said. Hartwick's phone was already in his hand, and somewhere in the east wing of Jefferson Elementary, Owen Grady was pushing a mop down a corridor with a small spiral notebook in his back pocket that contained 3 weeks of dates and times and observations, written in the flat, careful hand of a veteran who had learned long ago that the most powerful thing you could do when something wrong was happening was write it down exactly as you saw it, and hold on to it until someone finally asked. Someone was finally asking. Owen Grady arrived at Hartwick's office 7 minutes after the call went out. He came in his work clothes, gray uniform shirt with the school district patch on the sleeve, his bad knee giving him the slight rolling gait that Ryan had already been told about. He was 61 years old, and he moved like a man who had learned to carry pain without advertising it. He looked at the NWU uniform first, the way veterans always looked at uniforms first, reading branch and rank before they read anything else. Then he looked at Ghost, then at Nora. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a spiral notebook without being asked. "Figured somebody would want this eventually," he said. He set it on Hartwick's desk beside Diana's folder and the financial printout. "Wasn't sure who. Glad it's you." Ryan picked it up. The notebook was 31 pages. Owen had been keeping it since the 3rd week of October, which was 2 weeks after Ryan deployed. The entries were dated, timed, and written in the compressed, factual language of someone trained to document without editorializing. October 22nd, 12:14 p.m. Student Nora Mercer observed eating crackers in the east hallway during cafeteria period. Cafeteria roster checked, name marked unpaid. Student did not enter cafeteria. November 3rd. Student observed at library entrance with empty lunch bag. November 9th. Student asked cafeteria staff about payment status. Told account unpaid. Stepped aside without argument. November 14th. Student observed at back corner of library during lunch period. Appeared to have eaten nothing since arrival. It went on for 31 pages. Ryan read every entry. Owen stood near the door with his hands in his pockets and said nothing, which was the specific, respectful silence of a man who understood that some things needed to be read completely before they were discussed. When Ryan reached the last page, he closed the notebook and looked at Owen. 22 Army? He said. 3rd Infantry Division, Owen said. 2 tours. How long have you been watching her? Since I first saw her eating crackers in the hallway. 3 weeks into the school year. He paused. I know what a hungry kid looks like. I grew up hungry. Looks different from a kid who just doesn't feel like eating. She wasn't choosing not to eat. She was making do. Ryan looked at the notebook. He looked at Nora, who was looking at Owen with the expression of someone encountering for the first time the full scope of the quiet attention that had been watching over her. You saw all of this? She said to Owen. It was not a question. I saw what I could see, Owen said. I wrote it down because I didn't know what else to do. I'm a custodian. I don't have standing to walk into the principal's office and say a child is being neglected. I tried once, 3 weeks ago, with a different kid, different situation. Got told to stay in my lane. He looked at Ryan. Figured if the right person ever showed up, the notebook would matter more than my word. Ryan stood up. He looked at Hartwick. Get Principal Hayes in here, he said, right now, and get Karen Voss on the phone. Hartwick was already dialing. Karen did not answer the first call. She did not answer the second. She answered the third because the number was the school's main line, and she had been expecting a call about Nora's cafeteria account. She heard Hartwick's voice and started to speak. Then Hartwick said, Chief Petty Officer Mercer is here, and the call went silent for 2 full seconds. Ryan held his hand out for the phone. Hartwick gave it to him. Karen, Ryan said. Another silence. Longer this time. Ryan. Her voice had adjusted in the space of those seconds. The adjustment was toward calm, toward the tone of someone who has been caught mid-action and has decided that the best available strategy is to perform normalcy until a better option presents itself. "I didn't know you were coming back early. Is everything okay?" "No," Ryan said. "Everything is not okay. I'm at Nora's school. I'm looking at 6 months of financial records and a file that describes my daughter as delusional and prone to fabrication. And I'm looking at a forged authorization letter with my name on it." He paused. "I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to answer it honestly, because the honest answer and the dishonest answer are going to produce very different outcomes for you. Where is the money?" Silence. "Karen, where is the money?" The line stayed open for 4 more seconds. Then it went dead. Ryan lowered the phone. He looked at it for a moment. Then he handed it back to Hartwick. "She hung up," Hartwick said. "I know," Ryan said. "That's an answer." Ghost had been sitting beside Nora through the phone call. He stood up now, not in response to a command. He stood with the specific, settled shift of an animal that had moved from monitoring to active readiness. And he looked at Ryan with the amber eyes that had been reading this situation since 2 blocks from the school, and had been right about all of it. Ryan looked at Diana Yuen, who had been standing near the window throughout. "The text message from Karen," he said. "The one she sent to the school office. Do you still have the original?" "It's in the school's message log," Diana said. "The office receives external texts to the main number. They're time-stamped and stored. I printed a copy, but the original record is in the system." "I need it preserved," Ryan said. "Don't delete anything. Don't archive anything." Diana looked at Hartwick. "Is that something you can ensure right now?" Hartwick picked up his phone and called the office manager. His voice, when he spoke, had shed the managed, administrative quality it carried when Ryan first walked in. He had arrived somewhere that did not accommodate management. He was operating in the register of a man trying to do the correct thing under time pressure, and without the infrastructure he usually relied on. Principal Hayes arrived at the office 4 minutes later. He was a heavy-set man in his late 50s, white-haired, the specific physical presentation of someone who had spent decades in school administration and had developed the particular gravitas of a person who had seen most things and remained calm in the face of most of them. He came in looking at Hartwick and registered Ryan in the same 2-second sweep that Hartwick had used. Rank and branch, and canine, and expression, and arrived at a different category of response than Hartwick had. He extended his hand to Ryan immediately. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "I'm Principal Hayes. Tell me what's happened." It was the right opening. Ryan registered it as the right opening because it did not begin with an explanation of procedures or a reference to authorizations or any of the institutional framing that Hartwick had led with. It began with an invitation to deliver the facts, which was what the situation needed. Ryan delivered them. He spoke for 11 minutes without interruption. He covered the forged authorization letter, the redirected payments, the cafeteria access, Karen's interception of the phone calls, the file entries, and Owen's notebook. He covered Diana's folder and the text message. He did not editorialize. He did not characterize. He presented the sequence in order, clearly and without gaps, the way he would present an operational briefing, and he watched Hayes receive it the same way a good commander received a briefing, with full attention and no performance of reaction. When Ryan finished, Hayes turned to Hartwick. "The file entries," Hayes said, "all of them referencing fabrication and behavioral issues. Were any of them based on independent observation by school staff?" Hartwick hesitated. "They were based on reports from the authorized guardian and supported by Mrs. Dwyer's classroom observations," he said carefully. "Mrs. Dwyer's observations were informed by what she had been told by the authorized guardian," Ryan said. "I'm not saying she acted in bad faith. I'm saying she was given false information and built her observations on top of it. The file entries are not independent. They're circular." Hayes looked at Owen's notebook. He looked at Diana's folder. He looked at Nora, who had been sitting quietly through the entire meeting with Ghost beside her and her pencil case in her lap, and who looked back at him with the direct, unflinching gaze of a child who had been waiting for someone with sufficient authority to receive what everyone in this office was now holding. "How long has she been denied cafeteria access?" Hayes asked. 3 weeks, Owen said from near the door. Everyone in the room looked at him. He did not move. "Consistently. I have every date." Hayes looked at Owen for a moment. "You documented this," he said. "Somebody had to," Owen said. The room held that sentence for a moment. Then the major twist arrived. Hayes turned back to Hartwick and said, "Pull the security camera footage from the cafeteria entrance. The last 3 weeks." Hartwick looked at his computer. He pulled it up. The footage was time-stamped and clear. 3 weeks of lunch periods. Nora approaching the cafeteria counter. Nora being told she was not on the roster. Nora stepping aside. Nora leaving the cafeteria area each time with an empty tray. 17 separate incidents. But it was not the cafeteria footage that changed everything. It was the footage from the main parking lot. Hayes, scrolling back through the security archive, stopped on a date from 6 weeks ago. In the parking lot footage, a silver sedan was visible at the curb. Karen Voss was identifiable by her face in the driver's seat window. Hartwick was walking toward the car. They spoke through the window for approximately 40 seconds. Hartwick accepted something through the window, an envelope. He placed it inside his jacket. Hayes stopped the footage. The room was very quiet. Ryan looked at Hartwick. Hartwick was looking at the screen. "Leonard," Hayes said. His voice had dropped to the flat, controlled register of a man delivering a sentence he had not known he would need to deliver when he walked in. "Is there anything you want to tell me before I contact the district office?" Hartwick looked at the screen for a long time. He looked at Nora. Nora looked back at him with the clear, steady gaze that she had been maintaining all day through every pressure this building had applied to it. No anger in it. No satisfaction. Just the honest, direct look of a child who had been right about everything, and had known she was right, and had kept saying so anyway. Hartwick reached into his desk drawer. He pulled out a sealed envelope. He set it on the desk beside the financial printout and Diana's folder and Owen's notebook. "She gave it to me 6 weeks ago," he said. His voice had the quality of something that has been held under pressure for a long time and has just been allowed to decompress. "She said it was for administrative discretion. She said the girl had genuine behavioral issues and she needed the school to trust her assessment. She said if I kept the file consistent with what she was reporting, she would make sure the tuition was submitted by end of semester." He looked at Hayes. "I told myself it was a good faith arrangement. I told myself I was being pragmatic." "You were taking money to document a child as mentally unstable," Hayes said. Hartwick said nothing. Ghost walked across the office. He stopped in front of Hartwick's desk and sat down and looked at the man with the amber, unhurried, completely unapologetic attention of an animal that had assessed this situation from the beginning and had simply been waiting for the humans to arrive at the conclusion he reached within minutes of walking through the front door. Nora watched Ghost. Then she looked at her father. "He knew," she said quietly. "He always knows," Ryan said. Hayes picked up his phone. He called the district office. He called the district legal counsel. He called the school board liaison. While he was making calls, Ryan crouched beside Nora's chair. He looked at his daughter, at the thin face and the dark circles that 6 months of inadequate meals and inadequate sleep had put under her eyes. And he held the anger that was in his chest, the way he had been trained to hold things that needed to be held, tightly and without expression, because the situation required him present and functional, and the anger was not going anywhere. "Are you okay?" he asked her. She thought about it. "I'm okay now," she said. "I wasn't before, but I'm okay now." Ghost pressed his nose against her cheek. She put her hand on the back of his neck, the way she had been doing since the classroom. The instinctive, grounding contact of a child who had found something steady in an unsteady day and was not letting it go. Ryan straightened up. He looked at the envelope on the desk, at the financial printout, at Diana's folder, at Owen's notebook with 31 pages of dates and times that had been sitting in a custodian's back pocket, waiting for this moment. He looked at Hayes, who had just finished his calls and was standing with his phone in his hand and his face carrying the specific, heavy weight of a principal who had just discovered the full scope of what had been happening in his building and was now running the accounting of it. "What happens to her file?" Ryan said. It was not a question. "It will be corrected," Hayes said. "Completely. Every entry based on fraudulent information will be removed. The district legal team will oversee it." "Today," Ryan said. "Today," Hayes said. Ryan nodded once. Outside the office window, the school was running through its ordinary afternoon. Classes in session, hallways quiet. The building doing what buildings did, regardless of what was happening inside particular rooms within them. But in Hartwick's office, the ordinary afternoon had been suspended by the specific, irreversible weight of documentation that told the truth, laid out in sequence on a desk, each piece confirming the others, building a record that could not be managed or redirected or framed into something other than what it was. A child had been telling the truth for 6 months, and the evidence was finally in a room where it could be heard. The district legal counsel arrived at Jefferson Elementary at 2:47 in the afternoon. Her name was Ms. Patricia Odom, and she came in the specific, compressed energy of someone who had received a phone call that reorganized her afternoon and had reorganized it without complaint, because the nature of the call required it. She was 44, precise, and she set her briefcase on Hayes's conference table and opened it with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had been doing this long enough that urgency did not produce disorder in her. She looked at the documentation, all of it, the financial printout, the forged authorization letter, Diana's folder, Owen's notebook, the parking lot footage frozen on the frame that showed Hartwick accepting the envelope through Karen's car window, the text message log, Nora's academic file, with every fabricated entry highlighted in yellow by Diana, who had done it quietly and without being asked while Hayes was on the phone. Odom read everything in 18 minutes. When she finished, she looked at Ryan. "You deployed October 3rd, she said. "Correct. The authorization letter is dated September 28th. "I did not sign that letter," Ryan said. "I was on base during the entire final processing window. I have the base entry and exit logs. I can have them transmitted within the hour." Odom nodded. She made a note. She looked at the parking lot footage. "Mr. Hartwick," she said. She did not look up from her notepad. "The envelope. What was in it?" Hartwick was sitting at the far end of the conference table, with the bearing of a man who had made a decision in the last hour to cooperate completely, and was holding to that decision, one sentence at a time. "Cash," he said. $800. "In exchange for what specifically?" "Maintaining Nora's file consistent with Karen Voss's characterizations. Not escalating the tuition delinquency through official channels. Ensuring that any complaints from school staff about the child's welfare were directed to me rather than to the principal." He paused. "I redirected 2 concerns, one from Mrs. Diana Yuen and one from Owen Grady. I told them both it was being handled." The room was quiet. Owen was standing near the wall with his arms crossed. When Hartwick said his name, he looked at the ceiling briefly, and then back at the table. The controlled, deliberate response of a man deciding how to receive information about the limits of his own action. Diana was beside him. She was looking at her hands. Ryan was not looking at either of them. He was looking at Nora, who was sitting with Ghost at the far end of the table from Hartwick, as far from the man as the room allowed, and who was listening to everything with the same careful, absorptive attention she had been deploying all day. Odom turned to Hayes. "The file entries," she said. "Fabrication, delusional tendencies, psychological support recommendation. All of them sourced to Karen Voss's representations, maintained by Hartwick's administrative direction, reflected in Dwyer's classroom documentation." "Correct," Hayes said. "I want a complete corrected file prepared by end of business today," Odom said. "Every entry that references behavioral concerns originating from Karen Voss's reports is to be flagged, documented as based on fraudulent sourcing, and removed from the active academic record. The original entries will be retained in a separate administrative file for legal purposes only, not accessible to teachers or future schools." She looked at Hayes. "Is that clear?" "Completely," Hayes said. She turned to Ryan. "The financial matter, the redirected allotment payments. That is a federal issue given the military allotment system. I'm going to recommend you contact JAG today if you haven't already." "I made that call an hour ago," Ryan said. "The duty officer is reviewing the account history. Karen's access to the allotment relay has been suspended, pending investigation." Odom paused. "You've been here for 3 hours," she said. "I'm used to moving fast," Ryan said. She almost smiled. It did not fully arrive, but the intention of it was visible. She turned back to her notepad. "Mrs. Dwyer," Odom said. "Where is she?" Hayes looked at the clock. "She's finishing afternoon classes. She asked to speak with Nora before the end of the day. I told her we'd make that determination after this meeting." Odom looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at Nora. Nora was looking at Ghost, whose chin was resting on the table beside her arm. She was running her fingers along his ear in the slow, rhythmic way she had been doing since the classroom. The motion of a child who had found something steady and was using it to stay steady herself. "She can talk to Nora," Ryan said, "with me present." Odom made a note. She closed her briefcase. "I want to be clear about something," she said, addressing the room. "What happened to this child over the past 6 months constitutes educational neglect, financial fraud, and deliberate misrepresentation of a minor's psychological status. 3 separate legal categories. The school district will be cooperating fully with any investigation." She looked at Hartwick. "Your employment is suspended, effective immediately, pending the outcome of the district review. You are not to return to this building." She looked at Hayes. "You'll need to arrange interim coverage." "Already in process," Hayes said. Hartwick stood up from the table. He looked at Nora one more time. Ryan watched him do it, and watched what happened in the man's face when he did it. It was not the complex, managed expression of someone constructing a performance of regret. It was something smaller and more honest than that. The expression of a man who had made a series of choices that he had found ways to justify at each step, and who was now standing at the end of them, looking back at a 7-year-old girl eating crackers in a hallway, and could no longer find the justification for any of it. He did not speak. There was nothing to say that the moment would hold. He picked up his jacket and walked out. The door closed. The room exhaled. Diana sat down at the table for the first time since the meeting began. She had been standing for over an hour, and the sitting had the quality of someone releasing a tension they had been holding since October. Since the first time she saw Nora at the library entrance with an empty lunch bag, and made the decision to keep crackers in her desk drawer and wait. "I should have done more," she said. It was not addressed to anyone specific. "I took photographs, I kept records, but I never went over Hartwick's head. I never called the district directly. I kept thinking he would handle it." "He told you he was handling it," Owen said. "I knew he wasn't," Diana said. "I knew because Nora kept showing up hungry. If something was being handled, she would have stopped showing up hungry." She looked at Nora. "I'm sorry I didn't push harder." Nora looked at her. "You gave me crackers," Nora said, "every time. You never made me ask." Diana's jaw tightened. She nodded once. "That mattered," Nora said. "On the bad days, when I didn't know what was going to happen, the crackers were there. I knew they were going to be there." She paused. "That's not nothing." Diana covered her mouth with her hand for a moment. Then she put her hand down and straightened in her chair, and did what people do when a child has just said something that cuts through everything they thought they understood about what helping looks like. She held herself together. Owen cleared his throat. He was looking at the table. Ryan looked at him. "You wrote it down," Ryan said. 31 pages, for 3 weeks, without knowing if anyone was ever going to ask for it. "That's what you do," Owen said simply. "When you can't fix a thing directly, you document it. You hold on to it. You make sure that if the right person ever shows up, you have something real to give them." He looked at Ryan. "You showed up." Ryan said nothing for a moment. "Your knee," he said. "3rd Infantry Division. Is that a service injury?" Owen glanced down at his leg. "Fallujah, 2004. "How long have you been working here?" 11 years. Ryan looked at the spiral notebook still on the table. At 31 pages of dates and times, written in a back hallway by a man with a bad knee and 22 years of service, and the specific, enduring instinct to document the truth when he saw it, regardless of whether anyone gave him permission to care about it. "Thank you," Ryan said. Owen looked at him for a moment. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just make sure she's okay." "She will be," Ryan said. Ghost raised his head from the table and looked at Owen with the amber, steady attention that he offered to people he had decided were worth carrying in a specific category. His tail moved once. Owen looked at the dog. He did not say anything, but something in his face shifted slightly. The involuntary, private shift that people made when an animal regarded them with a quality of attention they did not expect and were not prepared for. He nodded once at Ghost. Ghost put his chin back on the table. Mrs. Dwyer knocked at the conference room door at 3:15. She came in without the file, and without the clipboard, and without any of the professional accessories she had been carrying all day. She looked smaller without them, which was not a physical observation. It was the specific quality of a person who had been operating inside a set of assumptions, and had had those assumptions removed, and was now standing in the unprotected space where the assumptions used to be. She looked at Ryan first. "I want to speak to Nora," she said, "if you'll allow it." Ryan looked at his daughter. Nora looked at Mrs. Dwyer with the same clear, measuring gaze she had been applying to everything all day. "Okay," Nora said. Dwyer pulled a chair around the table and sat close to Nora's level. Not at the end of the table, looking down the length of it, but close. The physical choice of someone who understood that the conversation she needed to have required proximity rather than distance. She folded her hands. "I want to tell you something," she said. "And I want you to know I've been thinking about how to say it since the moment your father walked in this morning." She paused. "I believed someone else's description of you instead of listening to you. Every time you told me something about your dad, I used what I had been told about you to decide it wasn't true. That is the opposite of what a teacher is supposed to do." She looked at the pencil case on the table. "You showed me a photograph. I set it aside. I told myself it didn't matter. It mattered. It was the most important thing you showed me all semester, and I set it aside." She looked at Nora directly. "I am sorry. Not because I'm required to say it. Because it is true." Nora was quiet for a moment. She reached into her pencil case and took out the folded photograph. She unfolded it and set it on the table facing Dwyer. "Ryan Mercer, NWU Type 3. Name and rank in the caption." "That's my dad," Nora said. Dwyer looked at the photograph. She looked at Ryan, at the NWU blouse, at the face that matched the photograph on the table exactly. "I know," she said. "I know it is." "I told you every time," Nora said. "I know," Dwyer said again. The word had a different weight the second time. "My dad says sorry is the beginning," Nora said, "not the end." Dwyer nodded. Her voice when she spoke was very quiet. "I know. I'm going to earn the rest of it." The room was still. Then Nora reached across and picked up the photograph and folded it back into her pencil case. The small, decisive motion of a child who had said what needed to be said and was now closing the chapter at the exact right moment. Hayes walked in at 3:22. He had something in his hand. A printed page, freshly generated from the school's record system. He set it in front of Ryan. "The corrected file," he said. "It will take the remainder of the day to process all entries, but this is the formal notation of the correction. Effective today, signed by me and by the district legal counsel." He paused. "I also want you to know that the district is opening an inquiry into how the student welfare flag system failed in this case. Specifically, how complaints from Diana Yuen and Owen Grady were routed in a way that prevented them from reaching the principal's office." Ryan looked at the notation, at his daughter's name at the top of the page, at the date and the correction language, and Hayes' signature at the bottom. He looked at Hayes. "She kept telling the truth," Ryan said. "For 6 months. Every time someone in this building called her a liar or a fabricator or said she needed a psychological evaluation, she kept saying her father was a Navy SEAL. She kept showing the photograph. She never stopped." He put the page down. "I want this school to understand that that is not a behavioral problem. That is the most important thing a child can do." Hayes held his gaze. "I understand," he said. Then Ryan's phone buzzed on the table. He looked at the screen. The JAG duty officer. A text that read, "Transfer records confirmed. 6 months redirected. Additional finding attached. Call when available." Ryan looked at the additional finding notification. He called. The JAG officer answered in 2 rings. "Chief Petty Officer Mercer. The transfer records confirm the financial fraud as reported. 6 months of allotment payments redirected to Karen Voss's personal account. Total approximately $14,000. A pause. "The additional finding is this. In reviewing the account access logs, we found that the communication relay was accessed on 11 occasions between October and February. The access pattern is consistent with selective forwarding, specifically blocking outbound calls from the relay during school hours and redirecting them to voicemail without notification." Ryan's jaw tightened. "She was blocking the calls during school hours," he said. "Correct. Which would mean any call placed during a school day would not reach the recipient, who would be at school and unable to answer. The call would go to voicemail. You would see a missed call from the relay. You would assume Nora was in class." Ryan looked at Nora. Nora was watching his face. He thought about the months of short calls, the Tuesdays when the relay showed a missed connection, the weeks when Nora seemed pulled back, the careful, contracted conversations that he had attributed to the hard mathematics of a 7-year-old managing a parent's absence. 11 blocked calls, 11 mornings when he had called and the call had gone to voicemail and he had assumed his daughter was in class. She had been in class. She had never known he called. He lowered the phone. Nora was still watching him. "Did Karen ever tell you I called?" he asked. His voice was even. He made it even. Nora thought about it. "She said you called sometimes, but I was at school," she said. "She said you left messages, but they were just to say hi, and there was nothing important." She paused. "I asked if I could hear them. She said they got deleted by accident." Ryan held his daughter's gaze. "I called every week," he said. "Every single week. Sometimes twice." Nora looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pencil case and took out the photograph one more time. She looked at it. She folded it. She put it back. She looked at Ghost. Ghost pressed his forehead against her arm. She took a slow breath. "I knew you would," she said. "I knew you were calling. I just couldn't hear it." Ryan reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. He held it with the specific, firm, unhurried grip of someone who was not letting go, and intended that to be understood. The afternoon light was doing what late afternoon light did in this part of the year, going gold and long, coming through the window at the angle that made ordinary things look more deliberate than they were. Hayes was gathering papers. Diana was at the door. Owen had stepped out into the hallway with the quiet, self-effacing courtesy of a man who understood which moments required witnesses and which required the people in them to be alone. Ghost stayed. He always stayed. He looked at Ryan, and then at Nora, and then at the door, and then back at Ryan, with the amber, clear-eyed attention that said he had read the room and assessed the threat and reached the conclusion that the threat today was over. Not the work, not the documentation, not the legal process, not the long, careful accounting of 6 months of damage that would take considerably longer than one afternoon to fully address. But the threat to this child in this building was over. Ghost sat down. He put his chin on Nora's arm. And Nora Mercer, 7 years old, who had been called a liar for telling the truth, who had eaten crackers in a hallway for 3 weeks because a system failed to protect her, who had kept a photograph in her pencil case every day for 6 months as the only evidence of the person she had been defending all along, held her father's hand and rested her head against his shoulder. She did not cry. She had already done that kind of hard work, and she was done with it. She was just present. Here, in this room, on this afternoon, with her father beside her, and a dog that had stopped walking on a sidewalk 2 blocks away, because it knew, before anyone else did, that something in that building required a human to look at it. The file on the table had her name on it. For the first time all year, the file told the truth. Karen Voss was at the family housing unit when the JAG investigators arrived at 4:37. Ryan was not there when it happened. He was in the school parking lot with Nora asleep against his shoulder in the back seat of the base pool vehicle. Ghost stretched across their feet, the engine running for the heat, because the afternoon had gone cold in the way that late afternoons went cold when the sun dropped and the day's business was finally finished. He received the notification by text from the JAG duty officer. 3 words: she was home. He read the text and put the phone in his pocket. Nora stirred slightly against his shoulder. She had been asleep for 20 minutes, the specific, immediate sleep of a child whose body had decided that the sustained effort of the last 7 hours was complete and that rest was now authorized. Her breathing was slow and even, and her hand was loosely around the pencil case in her lap, the way it had been since the classroom that morning. Ryan looked at her. He thought about the 11 blocked calls, about the Tuesday mornings when he had called from the relay and received the missed connection notification, and told himself his daughter was in class, and that the short conversations were a natural consequence of a long deployment. He thought about the specific, precise way Nora had said, "I knew you were calling, I just couldn't hear it." Not with anger. Not with the accumulated grievance of a child cataloging injustice. With the clear, grounded certainty of a child who had trusted something and been right to trust it, even when all the evidence she was being given pointed the other direction. She had been right about everything. Ghost raised his head and looked at Ryan. Ryan looked back at him. "I know," he said quietly. "You knew before I got off the bus." Ghost put his chin back on his paws. The text from the JAG officer came through 3 minutes later with the detail. Karen had not resisted. She had opened the door, seen the investigators, and made the specific, rapid calculation of a person who understood that the architecture she had been building for 6 months had just been presented to the right people with the right documentation, and that resistance was not an available option. She had asked for a lawyer. She had been advised of her rights. She had been taken for processing. Ryan's allotment account had been fully suspended from her access. The $14,000 was the subject of a recovery proceeding. The forged authorization letter had been flagged for handwriting analysis and fraud investigation. The communication relay access logs had been preserved as evidence. It was a federal matter now. Ryan turned his phone face down on the seat. He sat in the quiet of the vehicle with his daughter asleep against him and the days settling around them, and he let himself be still for the first time since Ghost had stopped walking on the sidewalk 9 hours ago. He was still for approximately 4 minutes. Then Nora woke up. She woke the way she had always woken, completely and immediately, no groggy middle state. She lifted her head and looked at Ghost, then at her father, then at the window and the school building visible beyond it. "Did I fall asleep?" she asked. "You did," he said. "For how long?" 25 minutes. She considered this. "Is it over?" she asked. She did not specify what she meant by over. She did not need to. "The legal part is just starting," Ryan said. "But the part where they call you a liar is over." She looked at the school building for a moment. "Can we go home?" she said. "We can go home," he said. He drove. The house was exactly as he had left it in October. He had arranged for a cleaning service to maintain it during the deployment, which meant it was clean and impersonal in the way of spaces that had been maintained without being lived in. He walked through it with Nora and Ghost, and opened windows and turned on lights and registered, room by room, the specific accumulated absence of 6 months, the stillness that settled into spaces when no one moved through them daily. Nora's room was the clearest evidence of the 6 months. She had not been here. She had been at Karen's. Her room was exactly as she had left it in October, the stuffed animals on the shelf in the order she had placed them, the drawings on the wall in the arrangement they had put up together the week before he deployed, the star-shaped nightlight in the corner that she had picked out at the hardware store when she was 5 and had insisted on keeping, even though she was not afraid of the dark, because she liked the shape of the light it made. Ryan turned it on. The room filled with the soft, angled light. Nora stood in the doorway and looked at her room. She looked at the nightlight, and at the drawings, and at the stuffed animals in their order, and at the specific, intact quality of a space that had been waiting for her for 6 months and had not changed. She walked in. She set her pencil case on the desk. She looked at it for a moment, at the worn zipper, and the slightly battered corner from a school year of daily handling. Then she opened it and took out the photograph. She looked at it. She looked at her father. "I want to put it on the wall," she said, "next to the drawings." Ryan took the photograph from her. He found a piece of tape in the desk drawer. because Nora had always kept a roll of tape in the desk drawer for exactly these kinds of decisions. And he pressed the photograph to the wall beside the drawings, the official NWU portrait, with his name and rank in the caption. The one she had been carrying in her pencil case since October, and would no longer need to carry, because the person in the photograph was standing 3 feet away and was not going anywhere. Nora looked at the photograph on the wall. "It looks better there," she said. "It does," he said. She looked at him. "Are you going to deploy again?" she asked. It was a direct question, delivered without cushioning, the way she asked all the questions that mattered. "Eventually," he said. "Not for a while. And when I do, we're going to have a different arrangement." He paused. "One I set up myself, with people I trust." "Not Karen," Nora said. "Not Karen," he confirmed. She nodded. That was enough for her. Not because she was not worried, but because she had learned over 7 years of being Ryan Mercer's daughter that when he said a thing, it was going to be true, and that what he needed from her in response was not reassurance, but acknowledgement. And she gave it the way she had learned to give it. "Okay," she said. Ghost walked past both of them and lay down on the rug beside Nora's bed. He turned twice and settled with his chin on his front paws, his amber eyes moving between the two of them in the slow, monitoring arc of an animal that had decided his operational perimeter for the evening was this room. Nora sat on the edge of her bed and looked at him. "He lives here now?" she asked. "He lives where I live," Ryan said. "Good," she said. She said it with the simple, complete conviction of a child who had found something steady on the worst day of her year and had made a quiet, permanent decision about it. Ryan made dinner. He made it in the kitchen that had been empty for 6 months, using the things he found in the pantry and the freezer, putting together the specific, uncomplicated meal of someone who had been eating base food for half a year and wanted something that tasted like home. Nora sat at the counter on a stool and talked while he cooked. The low, continuous, easy talk of a child who had been holding a lot of silence for a long time and had finally been returned to a space where talking was safe. She talked about October and November, about the things that had happened before the cafeteria access was cut off, the small erosions of her daily life that had begun in the first weeks after Ryan deployed. She did not tell it with drama. She told it the way she told everything, factually and in order. And Ryan listened the way he had trained himself to listen, completely and without interrupting, receiving each piece and placing it in the sequence where it belonged. She told him about the first time she showed the classroom her photograph and someone laughed. She told him about the essay she wrote in October that Dwyer marked as imaginative but factually unsupported. She told him about the Wednesday she came to school in the wrong shirt because Karen had not done the laundry and she had not wanted to ask twice. She told him about Owen seeing her in the hallway the first time, how he had looked at her and then gone back to mopping without saying anything, and how she had understood from the quality of that look that he had registered something real and filed it somewhere careful. She told him about Diana. "She never asked me to explain myself," Nora said. "Every other adult wanted me to justify things. Why I said what I said, whether I could prove it, whether I understood the consequences of making up stories." She picked at the edge of the counter with one finger. "Diana just left the crackers where I could see them. She never said anything about it. She never made me say thank you in a way that meant I had to admit I was hungry." Ryan put a plate of food in front of her. "She's a good person," he said. "Owen too," Nora said. "He wrote it all down, and he didn't even know if anyone would ever ask for it." "He trusted that the right person would show up eventually," Ryan said. "You showed up," Nora said. "Ghost showed up," Ryan said. "I followed him." Nora looked at Ghost, who was lying near the kitchen doorway, watching the room with the patient, settled attention of an animal that had completed a significant operation and was now running standard maintenance monitoring. "Do you think he knew?" she said. "Before we got there? Before he stopped walking?" Ryan thought about it. "I think he knew something was wrong in that building," he said. "I don't know exactly what he reads. I know he reads things I can't read. I stopped trying to explain it after the first year. I just learned to move when he stops." Nora was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad he stopped," she said. "Me too," Ryan said. They ate. The kitchen was warm, and the food was plain, and the conversation moved between things that mattered and things that did not, in the easy, natural way of people who had not sat across a table from each other for 6 months, and were rediscovering the specific comfort of ordinary presence. After dinner, Nora went to her room. Ryan sat at the kitchen table with his phone and went through the messages that had accumulated during the day. The JAG officer, Hayes, Odom, Diana, who had sent a brief message that read, "Nora's file correction is complete as of 5 p.m. today. Every entry has been formally corrected. Owen says to tell Nora he's glad she's okay." Ryan wrote back to Diana. Then he wrote to Owen. He sat for a moment after that. He thought about the morning, about Ghost stopping on the sidewalk 2 blocks from the school, about the specific planted certainty of the dog's stillness, and how long he had been working with that stillness, trusting it, learning the difference between its registers, and acting on the distinction without requiring an explanation. He thought about what it had cost him not to know what was happening. The calls he thought were missed because Nora was in class. The weeks he told himself the shortened conversations were normal. The months of distance he had attributed to deployment mathematics, rather than to systematic isolation. He had missed it. He had been thorough and experienced and trained, and he had missed it because he was 10,000 miles away, and the person he had trusted to protect his daughter had been specifically, methodically, ensuring that the channels through which he would have detected the problem were closed. He had missed it. Ghost had not. 2 blocks away, on a sidewalk, with no briefing and no evidence and no operational intelligence beyond what the air was carrying to him through a 2-inch crack in his car window, Ghost had stopped walking and turned his body toward a school building and made the sound that meant, "Something in there requires your attention." Ryan had not missed that. He had never, in 2 years of working with this dog, missed that. He got up and went to the hallway. Nora's door was cracked open. Through it, he could see the star-shaped light on, and Ghost lying on the rug beside the bed, and Nora on her side, facing the wall, with her breathing slow and even. The photograph was on the wall where they had put it, the NWU portrait, with his name and rank in the caption, visible from the doorway in the angled light. He stood there for a moment. He thought about the word liar, about a classroom full of children and a teacher holding up an essay and using that word to describe a 7-year-old who had been telling the truth every single time. He thought about Nora standing at the front of that classroom with her hands at her sides and her chin up and her voice steady. She had not flinched. She had not stopped saying it. She had shown the photograph every time someone told her it was not real. She had said, "My dad is a Navy SEAL," to every person who told her she was fabricating. She had told the truth to every room that told her the truth was wrong, for 6 months, without her father there to confirm it, without any institutional support, without anyone in authority standing beside her. She had been right. She had always been right. Ryan went back to the kitchen and sat at the table and let himself have the full weight of that for a moment. Not the anger. The pride. The specific, comprehensive, uncomplicated pride of a parent watching a child exhibit a quality of character that the parent recognizes because the parent spent years building it, and finding that the child built it further on her own in the exact circumstances designed to dismantle it. His phone buzzed, Hayes, a text that read, "The district is implementing a formal Gold Star family support protocol across all schools effective next semester. Your case was cited as the catalyst. We owe Nora an apology that goes beyond today." Ryan read it twice. He typed back, "She doesn't need an apology from the district. She needs to eat lunch." Hayes responded immediately, "That will never be a question again." Ryan put the phone down. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in December, the black SUV pulled up outside Jefferson Elementary at 7:45. Ryan got out in civilian clothes. Nora got out in a clean school uniform with her backpack on both shoulders and her pencil case in her front pocket. Ghost got out in his outreach vest. Diana Yuen was at the gate. She saw Nora and smiled the specific, whole smile of someone who had been waiting to see a particular child in a particular state, and was now seeing it and registering that it was real. Owen Grady was raking leaves near the path. He saw Ryan and straightened the way veterans straightened. Ryan gave him the nod. Owen gave it back. In the third-grade classroom, Dwyer was standing near the window when they came in. She had rearranged the desks into a circle. She looked at Nora and gave the small, direct nod of a woman who had made a promise and was keeping it one morning at a time. Nora nodded back. She took her seat in the circle with the easy, unhurried movement of a child who knew where she was going and knew she was welcome there. Ghost lay down beside her chair. Ryan stood at the back of the classroom and watched his daughter settle into her day, watched her open her notebook, watched her take out her pencil case and set it on the desk, the worn zipper and the battered corner from a year of daily handling. She did not open it. She did not need to. The photograph was on the wall at home, where it belonged, in a room with a star-shaped nightlight and drawings and a rug where a German shepherd slept at the foot of a bed every night, because that was where he had decided to be. The photograph did not need to travel in a pencil case anymore. The person in it was not going anywhere. Nora Mercer had told the truth for 6 months in a building that called her a liar. She had showed the photograph to every person who told her it was not real. She had carried her father's name through every room that tried to erase it, and she had not put it down once, not for a day, not for a moment, not under any of the pressure that a system running on fraudulent information had applied to it. She had been right. She had always been right. And the world that she was going to grow up in was going to be different from the one she had been surviving in. Not because institutions corrected themselves, though they had, and not because wrong people faced consequences, though they did, but because a dog on a sidewalk, 2 blocks from a school, had stopped walking and turned his body toward a building and refused to move until the person beside him understood that something in there required his attention. That was where it began. That was always where it began. With something that refused to look away. With something that stopped and turned and would not be moved until the truth came out into the light, where it could finally be seen for what it had always been. The truth does not disappear just because powerful people call it a lie. It waits. It holds. It carries itself in a pencil case every day to every room that tells it it is wrong. And when the right person finally stops to look, the truth is exactly where it has always been. Right there. Exactly as it always was. Waiting to be recognized.